Caleb Walker knelt in the dirt and pressed his hand against the woman's side, and when he pulled it back, his palm was soaked red. She grabbed his wrist with both hands, shaking, barely breathing, and said, "Please, don't let them take me back." He hadn't spoken to another human being in 3 weeks. He hadn't let anyone this close in 3 years. But something in the way she held on told him she had nothing left in this world except the grip of her own 2 hands and him. If this story already has you holding your breath, please subscribe to our channel and follow along until the very end. This one is going to take you somewhere you won't forget. And drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far this story travels. The summer of 1878 came down on the Montana mountains like a punishment. The heat was the kind that didn't break at sundown, the kind that baked into the pine needles and the dry creek beds and the split-rail fences, and stayed there radiating up through the soles of a man's boots long after the sun had dropped behind the ridge. It was the kind of summer that made tempers short and water scarce, and men meaner than they had any right to be. Caleb Walker didn't mind it. He'd worked through worse. Howe was on the east side of his property when the evening started to cool, replacing 3 fence rails that the spring flooding had rotted through. Shirtless, sweating through his hat band, driving iron posts with a maul that most men couldn't lift with 2 hands. His arms were the kind of arms that came from 15 years of mountain work. Not from vanity, not from showing off, but from pulling cattle out of mud holes and dragging timber up switchbacks and doing every hard thing alone because there was no one else to share it with. Howe was 36 years old. He felt 50. People in the valley below in the town of Harlan's Creek about 9 miles south called him the Mountain Ghost. They said it the way people said things they half believed and half invented, the way rumors grow thicker the less a man shows himself. They said Caleb Walker had killed a man in Colorado. They said he'd ridden with outlaws in his younger years. They said his wife had left him because she was afraid of him. None of it was true. But Caleb had stopped correcting people a long time ago. It was easier to let them fear him, easier to let the distance grow. Fear kept people away, and distance kept people safe, and keeping people safe was the only form of love he still knew how to practice. He swung the maul, set the rail, reached for the next one. That's when he heard the horse. He stopped moving. Not because the sound surprised him. There were always horses moving through the mountain passes in summer riders, heading north toward the timber camps or south toward the valley. What stopped him was the sound beneath the hoofbeats, a sound that didn't belong, ragged breathing, not the horses. A voice, thin, desperate, chopped up by pain. Caleb set the maul down against the post. He didn't run. He moved the way mountain men move when something is wrong, fast without being reckless, quiet without being timid, hands loose at his sides and every sense stretched wide open. He came around the north bend of his property line and stopped. A bay horse stood trembling at the edge of the trail reins, dragging in the dust. The saddle was empty. There were dark smears on the saddle horn, dried at the edges, fresh in the center. And collapsed against the base of his gatepost, one hand pressed hard into her side, was a woman. She was young, not yet 30. Her hair, dark brown, nearly black, had come loose from whatever it had been pinned into, and it fell across her face in tangled pieces. Her dress had been blue once. Now it was gray with trail dust and torn at the shoulder and stained dark along her ribs. She had the kind of face that had been pretty before someone had put their hands on it. High cheekbones, a strong jaw, dark eyes that were still open, still watching him, even as the rest of her seemed to be shutting down. She lifted her head when she heard his boots on the ground. Her eyes found his. "Please," she said. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Don't send me back." Caleb crouched down in front of her, not close enough to crowd her, just close enough to see. "Back where?" he said. "To him." Her jaw tightened. Silas Holt. He knew the name. Everyone in 3 counties knew the name. Silas Holt owned the Rocking H Ranch, 40,000 acres, stretching from the valley floor to the southern ridge. He owned the mill, the supply depot, the livery, and by most accounts, the sheriff's office in Harlan's Creek. He was the kind of man who smiled at church on Sunday and had a man's legs broken on Monday. Caleb looked at the woman's side. at the way her hand was pressed in tight against her ribs. "How bad?" he said. "I don't know." She winced as she shifted. "They had a knife. I got away before—" She stopped, swallowed. "I don't know how bad. Can you stand?" "I don't think so." He didn't ask again. He slid one arm beneath her knees and the other behind her back, and he stood. She made a sound, not a scream, not a cry, something quieter and more controlled than either, and her hand shot out and grabbed the front of his shirt. "I'm not going to drop you," he said. "I know," she said. She didn't let go. He carried her back toward the cabin. The horse followed on its own, as if it had been waiting for someone to show it which direction was safe. His name for the cabin was just the cabin. He didn't give it anything poetic. It was a single-room structure with a sleeping loft, a stone hearth, a work table that ran the full length of the east wall, and shelves that held everything a man needed to survive the better part of a winter alone. It was clean in the way that working men keep things clean, not pretty, not arranged for company, but ordered in the particular logic of a man who knows where everything is in the dark. He laid her down on his bunk. She was still holding his shirt. "You're going to have to let go," he said. She released it slowly, one finger at a time, like she was making a decision she wasn't certain about. "My name is Emma," she said. "Emma Carter. Caleb Walker." "I know who you are." He raised an eyebrow. That wasn't the usual response he got from strangers. Usually people either pretended not to know or made a point of backing up a step when they heard it. "You fixed the Hendersons' porch roof 2 winters ago," Emma said. "After the snow collapse. Ellen Henderson told me. She said you wouldn't take money for it. Didn't need money. She said you left before she could even thank you." He didn't say anything to that. He turned to the shelves and found the tin he kept his medical supplies in. Clean linen strips, carbolic, needle and thread, the same things that had been used on him more than once. "I'm going to need to see the wound," he said. "I'll turn around while you get your dress loose. Tell me when." He heard her moving behind him, heard the sharp hiss of breath that meant moving hurt more than she'd let on. "All right," she said. He turned. The wound was a slash 5, maybe 6 inches along her left side below her ribs. Not deep enough to have caught anything vital, but deep enough that it had bled steadily for however many hours she'd been riding. The skin around it was raised and angry. He'd seen worse. He'd had worse. "This is going to hurt," he said. "I'm aware. You want something to bite down on. Just do it." He cleaned the wound with carbolic. She didn't scream. She turned her head to the wall and breathed through her nose in long, controlled pulls, and her hand gripped the edge of the bunk mattress hard enough to pale her knuckles, and she didn't make a single sound. When he finished cleaning it, he threaded the needle. "Tell me something," he said, not to distract her, just because the silence was the kind that pressed down. She turned her head back toward him. What did you do that made Silas Holt send men with knives after you?" A pause. Her eyes went somewhere complicated. "I found his records," she said. "The real ones. Not the ones he shows the bank or the land office. The ones he keeps in a lockbox in the back room of the mill." Her chin lifted slightly. "He's been diverting water rights, buying land deeds that should have gone to families who settled here before him, forging signatures on transfer papers." She stopped and pressed her lips together while he made the first stitch. Then, 7 families lost their land to him in the last 3 years. They thought it was legal. It wasn't. Caleb worked steadily. "And the records," he said. "I have copies." She shifted her eyes toward the saddlebag he'd brought in from the horse. "In there. I made copies before I took the originals. Silas has the originals back by now. His men would have gone back for them first, but he doesn't know about the copies." "Where'd you copy them?" "The schoolhouse, at night after the children were gone." She paused again, breathed. "I was the teacher there, until 3 days ago." He tied off the last stitch, set the needle aside, began wrapping the clean linen around her ribs. 3 days, he said. "I rode north from town, tried to get to the timber camp at Ridgeback. I thought there would be men there who weren't on his payroll." Her voice went flat. "I was wrong. 2 of his riders caught me on the trail before I got there. She stopped. I got away. Barely. Where were you headed when you found my gate? Nowhere. She said it plainly without drama, which was somehow worse than if she'd cried it. I didn't have anywhere left to go. Caleb finished the bandaging. He stood back. She was watching him with those dark eyes, exhausted, cautious, measuring him the way people measure something they need to trust, but have been burned by before. You could have left me at the gate, she said. I didn't. Why not? He was quiet for a moment. Because someone did that for me once, he said. Long time ago. Carried me in when they had every reason to walk away. He moved toward the shelf and poured water from a clay jug into a tin cup and held it out to her. Drink this. All of it. She took the cup, drank, handed it back. Are they going to come here? She said. His men. Caleb set the cup back on the shelf. Probably, he said. And when they do, he turned to look at her. They'll leave, he said. It wasn't a boast. There was nothing in his voice that made it a boast. It was just the flattest, most certain thing he'd said since she'd arrived, and something in the plainness of it settled into her like an anchor. She lay back against the bunk. I'll be gone by morning, she said. As soon as I can sit a horse. No, you won't. Mr. Walker. That wound opens up on a mountain trail. You'll bleed out before you hit the valley, he said. You stay until it closes. 3 days, maybe 4. She opened her mouth. It's not a kindness, he said. It's arithmetic. She closed her mouth. Then after a moment, thank you. He didn't answer. He took his shirt from the hook by the door, shrugged it on, and went outside to see to her horse. The night came down cool and fast, the way mountain nights do in summer. All that heat lifting off in a rush the moment the sun cleared the ridge. Caleb sat on the porch step and listened to the dark. The pine trees moved in the wind off the high country. An owl called from somewhere to the west. The horses were quiet in the small paddock he'd built against the south wall. Inside, Emma Carter was asleep. He'd checked on her once. She was out deep, the kind of sleep that comes when a body has been running on terror for 3 days straight, and finally, against its own better judgment, lets go. She hadn't moved. Her color was better. The bandaging was holding. He thought about Silas Holt. He'd never had dealings with the man directly, but he'd seen his work. 3 years back, a family named Pruitt had farmed a small plot of bottomland at the base of his mountain. Good people kept to themselves had a boy of about 8 who used to wave at Caleb from across the creek when he rode the ridge trail. One summer they were there. The next summer they were gone, and a rocking H fence line ran through what had been their cornfield. Caleb had asked around. The story he got was that the Pruitts had signed over the deed and moved on, voluntarily. He'd believed it because he'd wanted to believe it. Because getting involved would have meant coming down from the mountain, and coming down from the mountain meant dealing with people, and dealing with people meant the possibility of losing them. And Caleb Walker had reached his limit on loss a long time ago. He thought about that boy. The way he used to wave. Caleb exhaled slowly through his nose. He picked up a small piece of wood he'd been shaping and turned it in his hands without looking at it. He thought about what Emma had said. 7 families. He thought about how matter-of-fact she'd said it. Not with self-pity, not with trembling outrage, just plain. Here are the facts. Here is what was done. Here is what I found. Here is why they want me dead. He'd known plenty of brave people in his life. He'd known men who were brave because they liked the feeling of it, who ran toward danger because danger made them feel alive. That wasn't the interesting kind. The interesting kind was the woman in there who had been a schoolteacher, not a scout, not a lawman, not anyone trained for this, who had gone into that mill at night with a pen and paper and done what needed doing because she'd decided someone had to, and then ridden 9 miles into the mountains bleeding to protect what she'd done. That was a different kind of courage entirely. He set the wood down. He thought she's going to get herself killed if she tries to ride out of here alone. He thought that's not my problem. He thought, isn't it though? He stayed on the porch step for a long time after that. She was awake before first light. He heard her moving careful, slow, trying not to make noise, and he got up from the chair where he'd spent the night and opened the cabin door and said, "There's coffee on." A pause from inside. "How did you know I was awake?" "Floor creaks," he said. "Third board from the bunk." Another pause. Then she appeared in the doorway, dressed pale but steady, one hand pressed against her side, without seeming to know she was doing it. He handed her a tin cup. She took it with both hands and drank. "I want to see the documents," he said. She looked at him over the rim of the cup. "Why?" "Because if Holt's men are coming up here, I want to know what they want badly enough to risk coming." She studied him for a moment. Then she went back inside. He heard the saddlebag buckles. She came out with a folded packet of papers and held them out. He took them, unfolded them on the porch railing. Read. "I wasn't a fast reader. Never had been. Never had much schooling past the basics, but he was thorough. He went through each page twice. He understood enough to understand that what Emma Carter was carrying was the kind of thing that could end a powerful man's empire or get a schoolteacher buried in a shallow grave in the mountains, depending entirely on who got hold of it first." He folded them back up and held them out to her. "Land office in Helena," he said. "These go to the Territorial Land Commissioner, not the local sheriff Holt owns him, not the county judge Holt's got his ear. Helena." "I know." She took the papers. "I knew that before I left. It's why I was trying to get to Ridgeback. I thought I could find someone to ride north with me." "Ridgeback won't help you," he said. "Holt runs credit for half those men. They won't risk it." She was quiet. "I'll take you to Helena," he said. She looked at him. "You don't," she started. 4 days ride," he said. "Maybe 5, depending on the passes. You ride with me, and we go north of the Rocking H Range through the high country. His men don't know the high country the way I do." He looked at her steadily. "But not until that wound stops trying to bleed. 2 more days. 3 if I think it needs it." Emma Carter stood on his porch in the early morning light with a cup of coffee in both hands and a packet of papers against her chest that could get them both killed. And she looked at him for a long moment with those dark, measuring eyes. "You don't know me," she said. "No," he said. "You have no reason to do this." "No," he said again. "I don't." "Then why?" I was quiet for a moment. He looked out toward the valley, still purple dark below the ridgeline, the first light not yet reaching down that far. "Because 7 families lost what they worked for," he said. "And because 1 more woman shouldn't have to die to make that right." He picked up his coffee. "Eat something," he said. "You lost blood yesterday. You need to eat." He went inside. She stood on the porch a moment longer. Then she followed him in. On the second morning, Caleb rode the perimeter of his property before Emma woke. He went slow, looking for sign. He found it on the south trail. 2 sets of fresh hoofprints, shod horses stopped and turned around probably sometime during the night. They'd come up. They'd seen the light in the cabin window maybe. Or they'd thought better of coming after a man on his own ground in the dark. They'd be back. I knew the shape of it now. Holt's men would come with a story, some legal-sounding thing, a warrant maybe, or a claim that the woman had stolen something. They'd expect Caleb Walker to hand her over because most men handed things over to Silas Holt's riders rather than deal with what came next. They didn't know him well enough. He rode back to the cabin. Emma was up, had the fire going, had found the dried beans, and started something in the pot on the hearth. She moved carefully, one arm close to her ribs, but she moved. She didn't ask to be waited on. She didn't ask him what needed doing. She just looked at what was there and did it. He stood in the doorway for a moment before she heard him. He thought she's going to be fine. He thought that's probably going to make this harder. Riders came up in the night, he said when she turned. Turned back. They'll try again. Emma set the spoon down against the edge of the pot. Her jaw didn't shake. Her hands didn't shake. She just looked at him and said, "How long do we have?" "A day," he said. "Maybe less. Depends on whether Holt sends men who use their heads or men who just follow orders." "Which kind does he usually send?" "Both kinds," Caleb said. "The second kind come first. The first kind come when the second kind don't come back. She took that in. Then we go today, she said. He considered. The wound was still too fresh. The high country trail was rough on a good day. But she was right that waiting meant fighting on Holt's timeline, not theirs. We leave at noon, he said, when the light hits the North Pass and I can see the whole trail ahead. He moved to the shelves and began pulling what they'd need. Hardtack dried meat, the good rope, his rifle, and the box of cartridges he kept above the door. Can you ride? Yes. Hard riding, fast when it needs to be fast. I said yes, Mr. Walker. He glanced at her. She looked back at him steadily. Not with bravado. With the particular calm of someone who has already been through the worst they could imagine and is still standing in it. He nodded. Caleb, he said. She raised an eyebrow. If we're riding the high country together, he said, you can call me Caleb. Something shifted in her expression. Not quite a smile, the situation wasn't built for smiling, but something that had warmth in it. All right, she said. Caleb. She turned back to the pot. He packed the saddlebags. Outside, the summer morning was already heating up. The pine trees held the light gold and still. The mountains above the cabin were blue-gray against the white of the sky. Somewhere below in the valley, Silas Holt was telling his men to go back up the mountain and come back with what was his. Somewhere above in the high passes, a road to Helena waited, and in a cabin at the edge of the world, two people who had every reason to distrust everything prepared to ride north together on the most dangerous errand either of them had ever chosen. Not because it was safe, not because it was easy, but because someone had to, and they were the ones who were there. They left at noon, like Caleb said. I didn't say much while they packed. Emma didn't either. There was an understanding between them that had settled in without being spoken, the kind that forms when two people are moving toward something dangerous, and words start to feel like weight neither of them can afford to carry. He helped her into the saddle without asking if she needed it. She let him without making it mean more than it was. Her bay was rested and watered. His own horse, a black mountain quarter horse he called Drum, short for nothing, just a name that had stuck, was already packed, rifle in the scabbard saddlebags loaded tight. Caleb had been making this kind of preparation his whole life. He didn't rush it, and he didn't waste motion. He swung up. You set the pace, he told her. If the wound pulls, you say so. I'll be fine. That's not what I said. She looked at him. If the wound pulls, she repeated slower, with just enough edge to let him know she'd heard him. I'll say so. He nodded. North Trail. Stay close. They moved out. The first hour was the hardest for her, and he knew it without her telling him. He could see it in the way she held her left arm, not gripping the reins differently. Nothing that obvious, but keeping that side of her body just slightly stiffened, like a door she was holding shut. She didn't complain. She didn't slow. She matched his pace and kept her eyes on the trail ahead. He set it moderate. Not slow enough to waste the day, not fast enough to cost her something they couldn't afford to lose. The high country trail went north by northwest, cutting above the rocking H range by better than 2,000 feet. It was a route most valley men didn't know existed. Caleb had found it his third winter on the mountain, tracking a stray horse through a snowstorm and stumbling into a passage that carved clean through the granite ridge like something intentional. He'd used it maybe a dozen times since. He'd never told anyone about it. I was telling her now in the way that mattered by taking her there. They were an hour out when she spoke. Tell me about the Pruitts, she said. He glanced at her. What do you know about the Pruitts? Enough. She kept her eyes on the trail. Their name was in Holt's records. The land transfer was dated August of 1875, but there was something wrong with the signature on the deed release. The letters were too uniform, too careful, like someone copying another person's handwriting and working too hard at it. Caleb was quiet for a moment. You noticed that, he said. I was a teacher for 6 years, she said. I've seen every way a child can fake their own signature and their parents'. You learn to read handwriting the way a doctor reads a pulse. A pause. The Pruitts didn't sign that deed, did they? No, he said. They didn't. She took that in. Do you know where they went? North. Wyoming, I heard. I heard the father got work on a cattle outfit up near Cheyenne. He adjusted his grip on the reins. The boy'd be about 11 now. Emma didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, there were 6 other families. I couldn't verify all the signatures, but 3 of them had the same problem. The same handwriting on the release documents that didn't match anything else in the file. Her voice was even methodical, the way she probably read arithmetic problems aloud in front of a classroom. But underneath it, not trembling, not angry. Something quieter than either was something that had clearly been sitting in her chest for a long time. He's been doing this for years, Caleb. It's not an accident. It's a system. I know, he said. And everyone in town knows. On some level, they have to. She finally looked at him. That's the part I can't make sense of. How does a man do this much damage in plain sight? Caleb thought about that for a long moment. Because he's careful about who he damages, he said finally. Newcomers, small families, people without connections, people nobody's going to go to the sheriff over. He paused. And because the people who do know are afraid of what it costs to say so. Were you afraid? The question was direct, not accusatory, just honest. He could have deflected it. He almost did. Yes, he said instead. She didn't react the way he expected, no surprise, no disappointment. Just a small nod, like she'd already known, and had only asked because she needed to hear him say it. Me too, she said. Until I saw those records. And then I was still afraid, but it... She shook her head slightly. It stopped feeling like the kind of fear that makes you stop. It started feeling like the kind that makes you move. He understood that. He'd felt it exactly once in his life, and it hadn't ended well. But he understood it. They rode on. They were 2 hours out when Caleb pulled Drum to a stop. Emma felt it before she heard anything, felt the way he went still, the way his right hand dropped toward the rifle without touching it. What is it? She said, keeping her voice low. Rider, below and east, moving parallel. She didn't ask how he could tell. She trusted that he could. One visible, he said. Doesn't mean one total. What do we do? Keep moving, he said. Same pace, don't look back. He put Drum forward again. If he's a scout, he's not going to engage alone. He's going back to report. And then we have maybe 2 hours before Holt knows which direction we're headed. Emma straightened in her saddle. She pressed her left arm slightly tighter to her ribs. The wound had been pulling for the last 20 minutes. She hadn't said so, and she looked at the trail ahead. Can we make the pass before they cut us off? If we push, he said. Can you push? Ask me that again, and I'll push you off the mountain myself, she said. He almost smiled. It surprised him. All right, he said. We push. He gave Drum his head, and the horse leaned into it, and Emma's bay came alongside without being asked, and they went up the mountain fast and hard, and without looking back. She fell once. Not off the horse, the trail narrowed through a rock cut, and her bay misstepped on loose shale, lurched sideways, and Emma's body torqued hard to compensate, and she made a sound. Short, involuntary, the kind you can't stop, and he was already off Drum and at her side before she'd finished steadying the horse. Let me see, he said. I'm fine. Emma. His voice wasn't loud. It was just certain the way a hand on a gate is certain. Let me see. She pressed her lips together. She pulled the edge of her riding jacket aside. The bandage had held, but there was a fresh stain at the lower corner, not soaked through, not critical, but more than it should have been. He looked at it, looked at her. We stop for 10 minutes, he said. I rewrap it, then we keep going. We don't have 10 minutes. We have 10 minutes or we stop permanently when you pass out on a mountain trail, he said. Sit. She sat. Not gracefully, she lowered herself to the flat rock at the trail's edge with the careful deliberateness of someone managing pain, and she held still while he crouched in front of her and unwound the bandage and redressed the wound with the supplies he kept in his saddlebag. She looked at the top of his head while he worked. You've done this before, she said. Many times. On yourself. Mostly. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Who taught you?" "An old trapper named Gideon Marsh," he said. He didn't look up from what he was doing. "Found me half dead in a snow gully when I was 19. Brought me back to his camp. Kept me alive 3 weeks." A pause. When I was well enough to ask why he bothered, he said he didn't know. Said it just seemed like the right thing at the time. Emma looked at him. "That's why," she said quietly. He tied off the bandage. "That's why," he said. He stood. "Up," he said. She got up. He helped her into the saddle. They kept going. They made the pass with the light still good, barely, but they made it, and Caleb didn't stop until they were down the other side and into the timber, where the tree cover closed in thick enough to make tracking difficult in fading light. He found a spot against a granite outcropping out of the wind off the trail, the kind of place you could only find if you already knew it was there. He helped Emma down and didn't let go of her arm until she nodded at him. "I'm all right," she said. She said it firmly enough that he believed her. They made a cold camp, no fire, nothing to give away position. He had dried meat and hardtack and a canteen of water from the mountain spring he'd filled that morning. She took what he gave her without protest, which told him she was hungrier than she'd let on. They sat against the rock face in the dark and ate. After a while she said, "Tell me something true about yourself." He looked at her in the dark. "Why?" he said. "Because I'm sitting in the mountains in the middle of the night with a man I met yesterday," she said. "And I've told you more about myself in 2 days than I've told most people in 6 years. It seems like I ought to know something real about you." He thought about it. Not about whether to answer he'd already decided he would, but about which true thing to start with. "I had a brother," he said. Emma went still. "Younger, Daniel. He was 22 when he died." He looked down at his hands in the dark, the way he always did when he said Daniel's name, like the hands had something to answer for. "We were logging the North Ridge together. There was a bad cut of tree that came down wrong. I told him to stand clear. He thought he knew where it was going to fall." A pause. He was wrong. The night moved around them. Wind in the pines. A creek somewhere below. "I couldn't get to him in time," Caleb said. "I tried. I know I tried. But for years after, for a long time after, the trying didn't feel like enough. Still doesn't some days." Emma didn't say she was sorry. He was grateful for that. People always said they were sorry, and it never helped anything. What she said was, "How old were you?" 24. "And you've been carrying that alone for 12 years. More or less. Is that why you went up the mountain?" He was quiet. "Partly," he said. "Partly it was that, and partly it was that I'd started to believe everyone I got close to paid for it somehow." He exhaled slowly. "Daniel. My father before him. A woman I was going to marry who got sick the winter after I proposed." He turned his head and looked at Emma in the dark. "I told myself it was safer for people if I stayed away. And now," she said, "now I'm sitting on a cold mountain with a fugitive schoolteacher who's got a knife wound and a pack of evidence that could get us both killed," he said. "So maybe my theory had some holes in it." She laughed. Not a polite laugh. A real one, short and genuine, surprised out of her, and she immediately pressed her hand to her ribs, because laughing hurt. And then she laughed again at the absurdity of that, and he found himself for the first time in longer than he could exactly remember, smiling in the dark. They were quiet for the while after that. Then she said, "My husband left me." He hadn't expected that. He stayed quiet. 2 years ago, I was teaching in Bozeman at the time. He decided he preferred a woman who wasn't more interested in her students than in his social engagements. She said it without bitterness. With something flatter than bitterness, the tone of someone who has already done all the work of anger and come out the other side into something like clarity. He wasn't a bad man, he just wanted a different woman. One who was quieter. More, she paused, decorative, I suppose. "Then he was a fool," Caleb said. She looked at him. "I mean that plainly," he said. "Not as a compliment. As a statement of fact. A man who'd let you go because you had a mind is a fool. Emma held his gaze for a moment. That's the most straightforward thing anyone said to me in 2 years, she said. I don't see the point of saying things any other way, he said. She looked away. No, she said quietly. I don't suppose you do. After a while, she asked, the woman you were going to marry, what was her name? Clara. Did you love her? Yes, he said. Very much. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. Grief doesn't care how long ago something was, she said. He looked at her. No, he said. It doesn't. He woke her before first light. She came awake fast and clean the way people do when they've learned that disorientation can get you killed. Riders, he said close to her ear. South of us. Maybe a mile. Moving slow, they're tracking. She was on her feet. How many be? 4, maybe 5. That's more than yesterday. Yes, he said. Holt knows which direction we're heading. He knows we went over the ridge, Caleb said. That's not the same as knowing exactly where we are. He was already breaking down the camp what little there was of it. But it means his first kind men are out now, the ones who think. She moved to her horse. Plan, she said. We get to the Ketterman place, he said. Old homestead about 4 hours north. Widow named Ruth Ketterman. She's got no love for Holt. He tried to buy her out twice, and she ran his men off with a shotgun both times. She'll take us in. She'll take me in, he said. I repaired her well house last fall, and her roof the winter before. She might not like you on principle, but she'll make room. Emma raised an eyebrow. On principle, she doesn't trust strangers, he said. She trusts work. Trust her work, and she'll trust you. He handed her a piece of hardtack and swung up into the saddle. Eat while we ride, he said. We can't stop. She bit into the hardtack, didn't make a face, and put her horse forward. They rode north in the gray pre-dawn, moving quiet and fast through the timber, and behind them, the sound of other horses moved through the dark, closer now, steady, patient. The kind of steady that meant the men making it were professionals. Caleb kept his face forward and his rifle loose in the scabbard and put another mile between them and the sound. Emma rode right beside him, matching him stride for stride. Not because he'd asked her to, because she'd decided to. They came out of the timber onto the open slope below the Ketterman homestead, just as the sun cleared the eastern ridge, and Caleb saw the smoke from the chimney and let out a breath he hadn't fully realized he'd been holding. He heard Emma do the same. Is that it? She said. That's it. Good. She straightened in the saddle. Because I want coffee, and I want a chair that isn't a horse, and I want to look at those documents one more time before we reach Helena. He looked at her. You're thinking about the documents, he said. Right now. I've been thinking about the documents since we left your cabin, she said. What else would I be thinking about? Most people who'd been through what you've been through in the last 3 days would be thinking about stopping, he said. She looked at him levelly. I'm not most people, she said. He held her gaze. No, he said. You're not. She put her horse forward toward the homestead. He watched her for just a moment before following the way she sat her horse straight and deliberate, one arm close against her ribs, heading toward a stranger's door in a stranger's country, because she'd decided that what she was carrying was more important than what it was costing her. Gideon Marsh, he thought, would have liked her. He put Drum into a trot and caught up. Ruth Ketterman opened her door before they reached it. She was a small woman, short and angular, somewhere between 60 and ancient, with the kind of face that had been lived in hard and didn't apologize for it. She was holding a shotgun, not pointed at them, just holding it the way some women hold a dish towel, present ready entirely without ceremony. Caleb Walker, she said. Morning, Mrs. Ketterman. Her eyes moved to Emma with the precision of a hawk assessing something in a field. Who's this? Emma Carter, Caleb said. She's a schoolteacher. She's got a knife wound in her side and documents that are going to end Silas Holt's operation in this territory. And she needs coffee and a chair. Ruth Ketterman looked at Emma for a long moment. Emma looked back. Didn't fidget. Didn't explain herself. Just met the older woman's gaze with the same steadiness she'd brought to everything else. Ruth lowered the shotgun another inch. "Can you cook?" she said. Emma blinked. Then, yes. "Then you can use my kitchen." Ruth turned back inside. "Leave the horses. Caleb knows where the paddock is." She disappeared through the door. Emma looked at Caleb. "High praise," he said. She almost smiled. "I got that impression." She dismounted carefully, handed her reins to him, and walked through Ruth Ketterman's door like she'd been doing it all her life. Inside, it happened fast. Emma sat at Ruth's kitchen table with the documents spread in front of her, and Ruth stood over her shoulder with her arms crossed and her jaw tight, and Emma walked her through what she'd found, name by name, document by document, signature by signature. Ruth didn't say anything for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was steady and very cold. "James Pruitt showed me that deed release the day before they left," she said. "He knew something was wrong with it. He asked me if he should fight it." A pause. "I told him a man without money can't fight a man with lawyers." She stopped. "I've regretted that every day since," she said. Emma put her hand on the older woman's arm. "You were telling him what was true," she said. "You couldn't know then what you know now." "I should have looked harder," Ruth said. "Yes," Emma said. "And so should a lot of us." She held the older woman's gaze. "That's what I'm trying to fix." Ruth looked at her for a long moment. Then she uncrossed her arms. She went to the stove. She poured 3 cups of coffee and set them on the table, without asking whether anyone wanted any. "I've got 2 nephews at the timber camp at Ridgeback," she said. "Holt doesn't own them. I can get word to them." Caleb, who had come in quietly and stood near the door, looked up. "What kind of word?" he said. "The kind that says if Caleb Walker and a schoolteacher don't make it through Ridgeback. By the end of the week, someone ought to ask Silas Holt why not." Ruth sat down across from Emma and wrapped her hands around her cup. "Insurance," she said. "The old-fashioned kind." Emma stared at her. Ruth raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Nothing," Emma said. "I'm just—" She exhaled slowly. "Not used to people helping." "Most people are decent when they're not scared," Ruth said plainly. "Silas Holt has made this county scared for a long time." She looked at the documents on the table. "High time somebody scared him back." Caleb drank his coffee. For the first time in 2 days, something in his chest settled. Not all the way, not enough to let his guard down, but enough to breathe around. He looked at Emma across the table. She was looking at him too. Neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. "Chaw!" It was Ruth who heard the horses first. She'd stepped outside to feed her chickens and came back through the door at a pace that said everything without saying anything. "4 riders," she said, "coming up the south road." Caleb was on his feet before she finished. "How far?" 10 minutes, maybe less." He looked at Emma. She was already folding the documents. "Back room," Ruth said, jerking her head. "Behind the flour sacks. There's a crawl space. I've hidden things in there before." Emma looked at Caleb. "Go," he said. "Caleb, Emma." His voice was the same as it had been on the mountain trail. Flat. Certain. Not loud. "Go." She held his gaze for 1 full second. Then she took the documents and went. Caleb turned to Ruth. "You don't have to be here for this," he said. Ruth picked up her shotgun off the hook beside the door. "It's my house," she said simply. They went outside to wait. The 4 riders came up slow, the way riders do when they want to look like they're not in a hurry, which is exactly how they look when they are. The man out front was big, not Caleb's size, but big enough with the kind of face that had been doing Silas Holt's hard errands for long enough to have forgotten what else it knew how to do. He wore a badge. Caleb recognized the type, not a real lawman, just a man Holt had found a use for. "Walker," the man said, reining up 20 feet out. "Morning," Caleb said. "You seen a woman brown hair came through this way yesterday or the day before?" "I've seen several women in my time," Caleb said. "You'll have to be more specific." The man's jaw tightened. "Don't play games. Woman named Emma Carter. She stole property from Mr. Holt. He wants it returned. What kind of property? That's Mr. Holt's business. It'd be my business too, Caleb said, if you're asking me to help retrieve it. The man looked at him. Then he looked at the house. Then at Ruth, standing in the doorway with her shotgun across her forearms. We'll need to search the property, he said. That right, Ruth said from the doorway. Ma'am, we have... You have what? Ruth said. A warrant. Because if you don't have a warrant signed by a judge that isn't in Silas Holt's pocket, what you have is nothing. And nothing doesn't get you through my door. The man shifted in his saddle. Caleb watched the other 3 riders. 2 of them were watching him. 1 of them was watching the house, which meant one of them was smarter than the others and was doing the arithmetic about where a woman could hide in a house that size. You're protecting a thief, the man said. I'm protecting my property line, Caleb said, which starts right about where your horse's front hooves are standing. The man looked at him. Caleb looked back. People talked about what it felt like to stand in front of Caleb Walker when he wasn't moving. They said it felt like standing in front of a cliff face, the kind of calm that isn't calm because nothing's happening, but calm because whatever's in it has decided it doesn't need to prove anything. The man's horse took a small step backward. The man didn't correct it. Mr. Holt's going to hear about this, the man said. I expect he will, Caleb said. Tell him I said hello. The 4 riders looked at each other. Then they turned their horses. They rode back down the south road, the same direction they'd come. Caleb watched them until they were out of sight. Then he went inside. Emma was already out of the back room, documents held against her chest, standing at the kitchen door. She'd heard all of it. She looked at him, at his face, at his hands, at the particular way a man's body holds itself after he stared something down and it went away. They'll come back, she said. Not today, he said. You can't know that. I know how men like that think, he said. They go back to Holt and tell him I'm in the way. Then Holt decides whether I'm a problem worth the kind of trouble I'll make for him. He met her eyes. Which means we have a window, small one. How small? Tomorrow morning maybe. Tonight if he's angry enough. Ruth set fresh coffee on the table. Then you eat, she said, and you rest, and you leave before first light. Emma sat down at the table. She set the documents down in front of her, smoothed the top page with her palm. Caleb sat across from her. Ruth put food on the table and didn't ask permission and didn't expect thanks and didn't say anything that wasn't necessary, which was exactly the right thing. They ate. Under the table, without planning to, Emma's foot came to rest against Caleb's boot. Neither of them moved it. Neither of them mentioned it. Outside in the direction of Harlan's Creek, the summer evening was going red and gold over the valley. And somewhere in that valley, a powerful man was being told that the mountain cowboy had stood in a doorway and refused to move, and that the schoolteacher was still alive, and that the documents were still out there. Silas Holt was going to decide tonight what kind of problem that was. Caleb Walker was going to make sure he'd decided wrong. They were up before the sky turned gray. Ruth had left bread and dried meat on the table the night before, wrapped in cloth packed like she'd known they'd be too pressed in the morning to do it themselves. Caleb found it in the dark and packed it without waking Emma. Then he went to wake Emma and found her already dressed, sitting on the edge of the bed with her boots on and the documents folded inside her jacket. She looked at him. I heard you get up, she said. You should have slept longer. So should you. She stood, moved carefully, but she moved. How's the time? We have maybe an hour before it's light enough to track us. Then let's not waste it. She followed him out. Ruth was standing at the paddock gate holding Drum's reins and Emma's bay already saddled, like she'd been out there working in the dark for a while and hadn't mentioned it to anyone. She handed the reins to Caleb without ceremony. My nephews at Ridgeback know you're coming, she said. Older one's named Thomas. Tell him his aunt said to treat you like family. We're grateful, Mrs. Ketterman, Emma said. Ruth looked at her the same way she'd looked at her the day before that Hawks assessment, quick and deep. You bring those documents back as proof, Ruth said. Whatever happens after, you make sure those families know what was done to them wasn't legal. That's all the gratitude I need. Emma nodded. I will. Ruth looked at Caleb. "Don't get her killed," she said. "Working on it," he said. He swung up. Emma mounted beside him. No hesitation, no sound from the wound. He'd redressed it before they slept. It was closing, still angry but closing. They moved out north while Ruth Ketterman stood at her gate and watched them go, shotgun resting across her forearms, small and immovable against the dark. The first 2 hours were quiet. Too quiet, and Caleb knew the difference between a mountain that was peaceful and a mountain that was holding its breath. He kept them off the main trail, cutting through timber where the going was slower, but the sightlines were shorter. Emma didn't complain about the pace. She matched him, read the terrain the way he read it, ducked the same low branches without being told. At some point in the second hour, she said without preamble, "You're not just watching the trail." "No," he said. "How many do you think he sent?" "More than 4. He guided Drum around a deadfall. Yesterday was a scouting run. Today's the real thing. Because we didn't hand over the documents. Because I stood in his man's way," he said. "For Holt, that's the bigger problem. A woman with papers is a legal problem. A man who won't move is a personal one." He glanced at her. "He'll want this handled personally now." Emma absorbed that. So this is about his pride as much as the documents. "Men like Holt always make it about their pride," he said. "That's how you beat them eventually. Proud men make decisions based on what they can't stand, not what makes sense. And what can't he stand? Being told no on his own land." Caleb kept his eyes moving through the trees. "He'll push hard and fast, and probably not smart. Which gives us an opening if we're still moving when he does." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "You've dealt with men like him before." "Once," he said. "Different territory, same type." "What happened?" A pause. "He pushed hard," Caleb said. "And not smart. And people got hurt before it was over." He kept his voice level. "But it was over." Emma looked at the side of his face. "Caleb." He looked at her. "We're going to make it to Helena," she said, not asking, stating. He held her gaze. "Yes," he said. "We are." They kept moving. The attack came from the left. Not riders, that was the thing that caught him slightly wrong-footed because he'd been watching for riders. 2 men on foot moving through the timber, parallel to the trail, and they came out fast, and the first thing Caleb heard was the sharp crack of a rifle shot that went wide and hit pine bark 6 inches from his shoulder. Drum reared. Caleb stayed in the saddle by pure reflex weight, dropped low hands, soft on the reins, and had the rifle out of the scabbard before the horse's front hooves hit the ground. "Emma, go!" he shouted. "I'm not—" "North, straight north, don't stop." Another shot. Closer. Emma's bay screamed and lurched sideways, and Emma stayed on. Barely. She stayed on, and Caleb put himself between her and the timber and fired once into the trees, not aiming to hit, aiming to make men duck and buy seconds. It worked. Emma was already moving the bay, stretching out into a hard gallop up the trail. Caleb pulled Drum around and followed, putting his body between whatever came next and Emma Carter's back. 2 more shots from the timber. Both missed. Then nothing. He pushed Drum hard for a quarter mile before he let the pace drop. Emma slowed when she heard him coming up alongside, and when she looked back at him, her face was pale and set, and her jaw was tight, and she was breathing through her nose in those controlled pulls he recognized from the night he'd stitched her side. "You're all right," he said. "Yes." A beat. "Are you?" "Yes." "You put yourself—" She stopped. "You put Drum between me and the guns." "Drum's faster than he looks," Caleb said. "That is not the point." "I know it's not," he said. "Keep riding." She looked at him for one more second. Something in her eyes that was too complicated to read, while they were both moving fast and frightened, and then she turned forward. They rode. The ambush changed the arithmetic. Caleb worked it out while they rode. Holt had put men on foot in the timber, which meant he'd anticipated the high trail, which meant someone who knew this country was working for him. That narrowed things. Most men who knew the high passes north of Harlan's Creek had worked with Caleb at some point, logging, trapping, driving cattle to the summer range. It meant there was a betrayal in the picture somewhere. He didn't say any of that to Emma yet. What he said when they slowed to a walk to rest the horses was, "We can't make Ridgeback the way we planned." She looked at him. "They know the route," he said. "How?" "Someone told them. Someone who knows this country." She went quiet. Then, "Who?" "I have a thought," he said. "But it doesn't matter right now. What matters is that we can't walk into Thomas Ketterman's camp if Holt's men are already there waiting." "Then how do we get to Helena?" He thought about it for a moment. "There's another way," he said. "Longer, harder. Goes through the Blackthorn Gorge and comes out east of Ridgeback. Nobody's used that trail in 3-4 years. It's rough going and the creek crossing's bad in summer runoff." "How bad?" "Bad enough that men who don't know it won't follow us through." She looked at him. "Will we make it through?" "I've done it twice," he said. "Once with a pack mule and once in the dark." "Not exactly the endorsement I was hoping for," she said. "It's the honest one," he said. "Your choice." Emma looked at the trail ahead. Then she looked behind them at the empty timber that was silent now, but wouldn't be for long. "Lead the way," she said. The Blackthorn Gorge earned its name. The trail dropped steep and fast, and the footing was loose shale that clattered and slid with every step, and the horses didn't like it and made their opinions known. Caleb dismounted and led Drum on foot, and Emma did the same with the bay, without being asked, which saved them from a conversation about pride. They went down single file, Caleb first picking each step, testing the ground before he put weight on it. The sound of the creek rose up from below, full and loud and fast, summer snowmelt still running hard this high. "Caleb," Emma said from behind him. "I hear it," he said. "Tell me the crossing's manageable." "It's manageable," he said. "Is that true, or are you just saying it?" "Both," he said. "Mostly true." She made a sound that was either a laugh or a curse, he couldn't quite tell. They made the creek bed. The water was fast and cold and running about chest high on the horses, thigh high on a person, and the bottom was slick river rock. Caleb stood at the edge and read it for a moment, the current, the line, the places where the water ran shallower over a gravel bar. "Stay upstream of the horses," he said. "Don't let them push you. If you go down, go feet first and don't fight it. There's a bank 50 yards down that'll stop you." "I'm not going down," Emma said. "Good. But now you know what to do if you do." He went in. The cold hit like a fist. Drum followed, hating every second of it, and Caleb talked to him low and steady, the whole way across the same tone he'd used with horses since he was a boy. The tone that said, "I know this is bad, and we're doing it anyway, and I'll tell you when it's over." He made the far bank, turned, and watched Emma. She'd gone in without hesitating. She was upstream of the bay, just like he'd said, one hand on the bridle, one hand out for balance, and the water was up to her hip, and she was leaning into the current and not fighting it, and her face was absolutely rigid with the effort of not making a sound. She made it across. She came up the bank and stood for a moment, dripping, jaw-set, eyes bright. "All right," she said. "That was bad." "Yes," he said. "If you ever suggest that again, I want more warning." "Noted." He put his hand on her arm, briefly checked that she was steady. She was. "You did well." "I almost went down twice." "Almost doesn't count out here," he said. She looked at him. "Is that mountain wisdom?" "That's any kind of wisdom," he said. "Come on. We need to move before those men work out where we crossed." They were an hour past the gorge, wet and moving, and beginning to warm again with the exertion of the trail, when Emma said, "Tell me about the man who betrayed the route." Caleb was quiet for a moment. "His name is Porter," he said. "Del Porter. Worked with me 2 summers ago logging the North Face. Good worker. Knew the high country almost as well as I do." A pause. "Last I heard he was working at the Rocking H mill." "Holt hired him away from you." "Holt hired him. Whether it was away from me specifically, I don't know." He kept his eyes on the trail. "Del had a family to feed, 2 kids. His wife was sick. Holt pays better than timber work, and you don't have to risk your neck on a logging slope. on a logging slope. Emma looked at him. "You don't sound angry." "I'm not angry at Dell," he said. "Dell made the choice that kept his kids fed. I don't know that I'd have done differently in his position." His jaw tightened just slightly. "I'm angry at the system that put him in that position." She was quiet for a moment. "You keep doing that," she said. "Doing what?" "Finding the reason to understand instead of just blame." She studied him. "Most men I know go straight to blame." "Blame's easier," he said. "Doesn't mean it's right." She looked at the trail ahead. "My husband blamed me," she said quietly, "for caring about things he thought didn't matter, for taking on problems that weren't mine to take on." She paused. "He said I had a hero complex. Do you—" She thought about it seriously, which he respected. "No," she said finally. "I just have trouble looking at a wrong thing and walking away from it." A small pause. "Maybe that's the same thing. I'm not sure." "It's not," Caleb said. She looked at him. "A hero complex is about how you see yourself," he said. "What you're describing is about how you see other people." He kept his eyes on the trail. "That's different." Emma held that for a long moment. "You're a surprising man, Caleb Walker," she said. "Most people don't stay long enough to find out," he said. They reached the edge of the Ridgeback timber camp from the east as planned, coming in quiet and watching before they showed themselves. Caleb stood in the tree line for 10 minutes, reading the camp, the movement of men, the placement of horses, which way the heads were turning. "How does it look?" Emma said beside him. "Settled," he said. "Not like men waiting for something, like men working." "Is that good?" "It means Holt's riders haven't got here ahead of us." He watched a moment longer. "There. The big one near the saw table. That's Thomas Ketterman." Emma looked. Thomas was Ruth's size and personality crammed into a man who'd been built by years of timber work wide through the shoulders, deliberate in his movements with a face that looked like it had made up its mind about most things and wasn't in the market for new opinions. "Ready," Caleb said. "Yes." They walked the horses out of the tree line. Thomas saw them when they were 50 yards out. His hand moved not for a weapon, just a shift in posture, the kind of automatic alertness of a man who lives where the unexpected is always possible. Then he recognized Caleb, and the alertness shifted into something else. "Walker," he said. "My aunt sent word you were coming." He looked at Emma. "You'd be the schoolteacher." "Emma Carter," she said. "Ruth said you've got Holt's blood up." He said it without judgment, almost appraisingly. "What do you need?" "A fast horse if we need a second one," Caleb said, "and 2 hours where nobody knows we were here." "Done," Thomas said. He turned back to his crew. "Nobody saw anything this morning," he said, loud enough for all of them to hear. "Anybody asks, this camp's been quiet since yesterday." The men looked up from their work. Some nodded. Some just went back to what they were doing. Not one of them asked a question. Emma stared. "Ruth's family," Thomas said simply, reading her expression. "And Holt tried to short my uncle's pay 3 years running. Nobody here owes him anything." He led them to the cook shack, away from the main camp. It was there in Thomas Ketterman's cook shack 40 miles south of Helena that everything shifted. Thomas put coffee on and sat across from them at the rough table, and Emma spread the documents out, and she had just started to explain the land transfer forgeries when Thomas's face changed. Not gradually, all at once. "Stop," he said. Emma stopped. Thomas reached across the table and put his finger on one of the documents. A transfer deed. The name at the bottom wasn't one Emma had focused on. It was smaller, a secondary notation, a co-signatory. "Where did you get this?" Thomas said. His voice had gone very quiet. "From Holt's records room," Emma said. "The lockbox in the mill." Thomas looked at Caleb. Caleb looked at the document. The co-signatory name on the deed was William Archibald Pryor, Associate Territorial Land Commissioner, Helena. Emma saw it at the same moment. The blood drained from her face. "He has someone in Helena," she said. "Not just someone," Thomas said. His jaw was tight. Pryor's the man who certifies all land transfers in the territory. If his signature is on these documents—" He stopped. "If you walk into that land office with these, the first man to see them reports to Pryor, and Pryor reports to Holt." The room went very still. Emma stared at the document. 3 days of riding, a knife wound, a river crossing, 2 ambushes, and the man they'd been riding toward was already bought. "Is there someone above Pryor?" Caleb said. Thomas thought. "Federal level, yes. There's a U.S. Land Commissioner out of Washington who has authority over the territorial offices. But you'd need a federal marshal to carry a complaint that high. You can't just walk in." "Where's the nearest federal marshal?" Emma said. "Fort Benton," Thomas said. "North of Helena. 2 more days' ride." Emma looked at the documents on the table. Then she looked at Caleb. "We have to go past Helena," she said. "Yes," he said. "Holt's riders are 2 hours behind us, maybe less." "Yes. And we've just found out the man we were going to is already on Holt's payroll." "Yes." She pressed her lips together. Then she folded the documents carefully, slowly, with the same deliberate attention she'd given them every time, and she tucked them inside her jacket. She looked at Thomas Ketterman. "Can you get us north of Helena without going through it?" Thomas looked at Caleb. "She always liked this." "Far as I can tell," Caleb said. Thomas almost smiled. "There's a freight road," he said. "Runs east of the valley, cuts north of town. Miners use it. It adds a day." "We don't have a day," Emma said. "Then you ride it fast," Thomas said. "I'll give you the best horse in this camp for a second mount. Fresh, rested, strong." He stood. "And I'm sending 2 of my men with you." "You don't have to," Caleb started. "My aunt told me to treat you like family," Thomas said. He met Caleb's eyes. "My family doesn't ride into federal business alone." He picked up his cup and drank the last of his coffee. "Give me 20 minutes." He walked out. Emma let out a slow breath. Then she put both hands flat on the table and just sat there for a moment, steadying herself. Caleb watched her. "We're still moving," she said, more to herself than to him. "Yes," he said. "I keep thinking at some point there has to be a wall we can't get past." "There might be," he said. "We haven't hit it yet." She looked at him. "How are you so calm?" "I'm not," he said simply. "I just don't see the point of being loud about it." She studied his face. There was something in her expression that had been building for days through the fever of the first night and the gorge crossing and the ambush in the timber, and now this something accumulating behind her eyes that she hadn't let out yet. "I keep thinking about what I said to you at your cabin," she said, "that I'd be gone by morning. I remember, I was so certain I could do this alone." She shook her head. "I'd been alone for so long I'd started to think that was just the condition, the default." A pause. "You changed that." He looked at her. "You changed it yourself," he said. "I just got in the road." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "That's going to be one of the most frustratingly humble things anyone's ever said to me." I didn't say anything to that. But something in his chest shifted, something that had been braced for a long time. The way a man braces against cold, held its position a moment longer and then quietly let go a little. Thomas came back in. "Horses are ready," he said. "My men Cord and Bray are saddled up. They know the freight road." He looked at them both. "You ride hard, and you don't stop in Helena for anything. You get to Fort Benton, you ask for Marshal John Cade. Tell him Thomas Ketterman sent you. He and I go back." "Thank you," Emma said. "Thank me by making it stick," Thomas said. "Those land transfers, the forgeries, all of it." His face was set. "There are families in this territory that have been waiting 3 years for someone to make it stick." Emma stood up straight. "They won't wait much longer," she said. They rode out of Ridgeback with Thomas Ketterman's 2 men flanking them. Cord on the left, Bray on the right, both of them quiet, competent, the kind of men who didn't need to talk to communicate. The freight road was rough and fast, and they used every minute of light left in the day. 3 miles out, Bray dropped back alongside Caleb. "Riders coming up behind," he said quietly. 5 of them. Fast." Caleb looked back. Couldn't see them yet through the timber, but trusted the man's ears. "How long?" he said. 10 minutes, maybe." Caleb pulled up beside Emma. "We've got company," he said. She didn't look back. "How far ahead is the open stretch?" "Cord," Caleb called. "How far to the open ground?" 2 miles, Cord said without looking back. Emma leaned forward over her horse's neck. "Then we run," she said. And they ran. The horses stretched out flat and hard and fast, and the freight road opened up ahead of them, and the light was going gold and low on the ridge, and the sound of hoofbeats behind them rose, and Caleb heard a shout, not close enough yet, not close enough to be dangerous, but close enough to be real. He looked at Emma. She was riding full out, her body low and forward, her hair coming loose in the wind, and her left hand was pressed once against her ribs. One moment, one check, and then she put it back on the reins, and she did not slow down. He matched her. They came out of the timber onto the open ground and didn't stop, and behind them the shouting faded as the distance grew and grew, and the riders behind them pushed, but couldn't match what 4 rested horses and 4 people with something to lose could do on an open road. A mile. 2 miles. 3. Finally Cord raised his hand and brought them to a walk, breathing hard, horses steaming. Silence behind them. Emma straightened. She looked at Caleb. Her face was flushed, and her eyes were bright, and she was breathing hard, and she looked more alive than anyone he'd seen in a long time. "We lost them," Bray said. "For now," Caleb said. Emma looked at him. "For now is enough," she said. He looked at her there on the open road heading north, the document safe against her chest, the last of the summer light on her face. I thought about everything that had led here. The gate, the wound, the cold mountain camp where she'd asked him to tell her something true, the creek crossing, the cook shack where the whole plan had cracked open, and she'd folded those documents quietly and asked about the next road forward without blinking. He thought this woman is going to get those documents to Fort Benton if she has to ride through fire to do it. He thought, I will not let that happen alone. They rode north. The mountain was behind them now, and everything that mattered was still ahead. They rode through the night. Not hard. The horses couldn't sustain hard through the dark, but steady. Cord picking the road ahead, with the quiet confidence of a man who'd traveled it enough times to know it by feel. Bray rode rear, watching behind them. Nobody talked much. There wasn't much to say that the situation hadn't already said better. Emma rode between Caleb and Cord and didn't ask to stop. Around midnight, Caleb pulled alongside her. "How's the side?" he said low enough for just her. "Manageable," she said. "That's not a straight answer." "It's the straightest one I've got right now." She kept her eyes on the road. "If I tell you it hurts, you'll want to stop. We can't stop." "I want to stop anyway," he said. "We're not stopping. But I want to know." She exhaled. "It pulls when the horse stumbles. Not bleeding, I checked an hour ago. Just tight and unhappy." "All right. All right," she repeated. Then after a moment, "Thank you for asking." "I'll keep asking," he said. "I know," she said. And something in the way she said it, not resigned, not annoyed, something almost quiet and careful, like she was handling a thing she wasn't used to having, made him look at her profile in the dark for a moment before he turned his eyes back to the road. They rode on. Fort Benton came into view 2 hours past dawn. It was bigger than Harlan's Creek, a real town with a river landing and freight warehouses, and the permanent settled look of a place that had decided it was staying. After 4 days of mountain trails and timber camps and cold camps and creek crossings, the solidity of it felt almost unreal. Cord knew where the marshal's office was. He didn't have to ask. They tied the horses at the rail, and Caleb helped Emma down. She let him, which told him the last stretch of riding had cost her more than she'd said, and they went up the steps together. The deputy inside was young, maybe 22, with the careful alertness of someone who was new to authority and trying not to show it. He looked at them, at Caleb's size, at Emma's road-worn state, at Cord and Bray behind them, and his hand moved toward his desk without quite touching it. "Help you," he said. "We need Marshal Cade," Caleb said. Thomas Ketterman sent us. The name landed. The deputy's posture shifted not much but enough. "Marshal's in," he said. "I'll get him." He went through the back door. Emma stood beside Caleb in the small front office and didn't lean on anything, but she wanted to, he could tell. She was holding herself together through sheer will had been for the better part of the last 24 hours, and she was running close to the bottom of whatever reserve she'd been drawing from. He didn't say that. What he said was, "You're almost there." She looked at him. "I know," she said. "That's the part that's hardest somehow. When you can almost see it." He understood that. He'd felt it before, the way the last stretch of hard work is always the one that wants to break you, because your mind starts counting the distance to the end, and suddenly every step feels longer. The back door opened. Marshal John Cade was 50-something, lean and weathered with gray at his temples, and the kind of eyes that had seen enough of the world to have settled into a permanent, quiet assessment of it. He looked at them the way a man looks at something he's going to have to make a decision about, and is already working out the angles. "Thomas Ketterman's name is worth something to me," he said. "What do you have?" Emma reached inside her jacket and set the documents on his desk. Cade read for a long time. Nobody talked while he did. Emma sat in the chair the deputy had brought in for her. She'd stopped declining chairs about an hour ago, which Caleb took as a sign of how much the ride had taken, and Caleb stood near the window and watched the street and let the marshal work. At some point, Cade said without looking up, "William Pryor's signature is on 3 of these." "Yes," Emma said. "You understand what you're saying about a sitting territorial official." "I understand exactly what I'm saying," Emma said. "I've understood it since the night I found these in Holt's lockbox. That's why I didn't go to the Helena land office directly." Cade looked up. "How'd you know not to?" "Because the co-signatory notation was on the first document I unfolded," Emma said. "And I'd been a teacher long enough to know that when a student hides something inside another thing they don't want you to look at, the hidden thing is always more important." She held his gaze. Holt wasn't hiding Pryor, he was hiding behind him. Cade looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at Caleb. "She always think this fast," he said. "Faster," Caleb said. Cade looked back at the documents. "I need to send a wire to the federal land office in Washington before I move on this," he said. "And I need a sworn statement from both of you. Written, signed, witnessed." He set the papers down. "And I need to know that you understand what happens next is going to be slow." Emma's face tightened. "How slow?" "Legal slow," he said. "Which is slower than any other kind." He folded his hands on the desk. "I can arrest Holt on federal charges. Land fraud at this scale falls under federal statute. I can suspend Pryor pending investigation. But building the case that sticks, the kind that doesn't get thrown out by a sympathetic judge, that takes time, and it takes testimony." He looked between them. From people who were there. People who lost land. People who signed documents they were told were legitimate. "The Pruitts are in Wyoming," Caleb said. "I can find them." "There are others," Emma said. "I kept a separate list of every family name in those records. 6 other families within the territory. I know where 2 of them are. They didn't go far. They couldn't afford to." She reached into her jacket again, another pocket smaller, tucked deep, and produced a folded piece of paper that Caleb hadn't even known she was carrying. She set it on the desk beside the documents. Cade looked at it, looked at her. "You've been carrying that the whole time," he said. "Since the first night," she said. "Before I left Harlan's Creek. I knew if Holt got the originals, the copies would matter. And if Holt got the copies, the list would matter. You plan for the worst and hope for better." Cade was quiet for a moment. "Miss Carter," he said, "what did you say you did before you were a teacher?" "I was a teacher," she said simply. "That's all." He almost smiled. "All right," he said. He stood. "Deputy Morrison is going to take your statements. I'm going to the telegraph office." He picked up the documents with the careful handling of a man who understood what he was holding. "Don't leave Fort Benton until I tell you it's safe to." He walked out. Emma looked at Caleb. "He's good," she said. "Thomas doesn't vouch for people who aren't," Caleb said. She leaned back in her chair. Just slightly, just enough to let some of the tension out of her spine the first time he'd seen her do that in days. "We made it," she said. "We made it here," he said. "It's not over." "I know." She looked at the ceiling for a moment. "But we made it here." He looked at her. At the road dust still in her hair. At the careful way she was holding her left side even at rest. At the way her hands folded in her lap had finally stopped being ready. "Yes," he said. "We did." The wire to Washington went out that morning. By noon, Cade had a response. He came back to the marshal's office with the kind of expression that meant news, not all of it simple, none of it bad. "Federal Land Commissioner is sending an investigator," he said. 2 weeks out, maybe 3. He sat down. "In the meantime, I'm authorized to place Silas Holt under federal hold. He can't transfer property, can't move funds, can't leave the territory." He looked at Emma. "And Pryor's been suspended pending review, as of this morning." Emma closed her eyes. Just for a second. Just long enough to let that land somewhere real. "The families," she said when she opened them. "The land they lost. If the forgeries hold up under investigation and based on what I'm looking at, the transfers can be reversed," Cade said. "It's not instant, but it's possible." He paused. "Legal possible, which is the best kind." Emma looked at the list she'd given him. At the names. "The Pruitts have a boy," she said. "He'd be 11 now. He grew up watching his father's farm get taken." She kept her voice steady. "That boy should know that what happened to his family was wrong. Not just wrong, illegal. That someone in the law looked at it and said so." Cade looked at her for a long moment. "Miss Carter," he said, "I'm going to make sure he does." It was Cord who brought the news that broke it open. He came in from the street mid-afternoon moving with that particular controlled urgency that meant something had happened that couldn't wait. "Holt's in Fort Benton," he said. The room went still. Caleb was on his feet. "When?" he said. "Rode in an hour ago. 6 men with him." Cord looked at Cade. "He's at the land office, talking to someone." "Pryor's man," Cade said. His voice went flat. "He got word of the suspension before my order was delivered." He stood. "He's trying to file counter-documentation. If he gets a sympathetic ear in that office before my federal order is formally logged." "Go," Emma said. Cade was already moving. Caleb was right behind him. Emma stood. "Emma," Caleb started. "Don't," she said. Her voice was sharp and certain and left no room. "Don't tell me to stay here. Those are my documents. Those are the families I know. If Holt is in that building trying to undo what I spent 3 days writing to do." She was already moving toward the door. "I'm going." He looked at her for 1 second. Then he stepped aside. They went out into the street. The land office was 3 blocks east, and Holt was coming out of it when they were half a block away. Caleb recognized him from description. There was only one man in Fort Benton that afternoon who moved like he owned the ground under him by habit rather than by right. Silas Holt was maybe 55 broad in the chest and heavy in the jaw, with the kind of groomed, settled authority that money builds over a long time. He wore a good coat. He walked with 4 men around him, like a man who had never had to wonder whether someone was watching his back. He saw Cade first. Then he saw Emma. Something moved across his face. Something that wasn't quite surprise, because men like Holt trained themselves out of showing surprise, but was the next thing over from it. The rapid internal recalculation of a man who'd expected a problem to be solved by now and was confronting the fact that it hadn't been. "Marshal," he said. His voice was smooth, practiced. "I was just heading to find you." "I imagine you were," Cade said. "I understand there's been some confusion about certain land records," Holt said. "I want to clear that up directly." "Confusion," Emma said. He looked at her. She looked back. This was the first time she'd stood in front of him. After everything, the knife wound the mountain, the creek crossing the ambush in the timber, 4 days of riding and bleeding, and holding those documents against her chest. This was the first time she'd been close enough to see his face. I was not what she'd expected, and that was the most frightening thing about him. He looked reasonable. He looked like a man you'd believe. "Miss Carter," he said, "I'm glad you're safe. I heard you'd had some trouble on the road. My men were looking for you out of concern." "Your men put a knife in my side," she said. His expression didn't change. "That's a serious accusation." "I have serious evidence," she said, "which is now in federal hands." A flicker, just a flicker, in the corner of his left eye. "Whatever documents you believe you have," he said, still smooth, still steady. "I assure you they've been taken out of context. Land transfers in this territory are complex. There are always clerical irregularities." "The Pruitt deed," Emma said. "August 1875. James Pruitt's signature was forged. I can prove it with 6 years of his handwriting from school enrollment records that predate your transfer by 4 years. Silence. "The Calloway claim," she said. "March 1876. Margaret Calloway signed under duress. Her husband was being held at the mill on a fabricated debt. That's extortion, Mr. Holt. Federal Statute Section 12. More silence. "The Henderson Water rights," she said. 1877. The witness signature on that transfer belongs to a man who died in the winter of 1876, which means someone signed a dead man's name to a legal document. That's fraud compounded by forgery. Holt's smooth expression had developed a fault line. It wasn't visible to anyone standing at a distance, but Emma was not at a distance. "You will regret this," he said. His voice had changed. Not loud, not threatening in the way of men who threaten because they're afraid. Threatening in the way of a man who is recalculating rapidly what his options are and how he's going to use them. "I reckon I won't," Emma said. Caleb stepped forward, not in front of her, beside her, and he looked at Silas Holt with the same expression he'd used on the man's riders at Ruth Ketterman's gate. That particular stillness that wasn't passivity, that was something else. The kind of calm that lives on the far side of having already decided. Holt looked at him. A long moment passed. Then Holt looked back at Cade. "I'd like to speak to my lawyer," he said. "I'll bet you would," Cade said. "Deputy Morrison's going to take you inside, and we're going to have a long conversation first." He nodded to Morrison, who had appeared from the direction of the office. "Mr. Holt, your men can wait outside." Holt looked at his 4 riders. They looked back at him. The calculation passed between them. The kind of calculation that men make when they're deciding whether their loyalty is worth the specific number of federal charges now on the table, and one by one they stepped back. Morrison walked Holt inside. The 4 riders stood in the street. And then, because the day had apparently decided it wasn't finished, one of them, not the smartest one, it turned out, looked at Emma and said, "This ain't over, miss." Caleb turned. I didn't say anything. He looked at the man for a long, level moment, the kind of look that communicates its entire content without a single word. The man took a step back. "We're done here," Cord said pleasantly from Caleb's left. Bray moved to his right without being asked. The 4 riders left. Emma let out a breath. It came out longer and more ragged than she'd intended, and she pressed her lips together and straightened, and Caleb put his hand at her back, just briefly, just steady, and she didn't pull away from it. "You were right," he said quietly. "About what?" "You said you'd make it stick." She looked at him. "It's not stuck yet," she said. "It's sticking," he said. They stayed in Fort Benton for 3 days, while Cade worked through the formal proceedings. Emma gave her full sworn statement on the first day, 4 hours of careful, methodical testimony that Cade said was the most organized thing he'd taken down in 20 years of federal work. Caleb gave his on the second day, shorter but specific, where it mattered, covering the ambush in the timber and the riders at Ketterman's gate, and everything he'd personally witnessed. On the evening of the second day, a wire came in from Wyoming. Cade brought it to the room at the boarding house where Emma had been resting. She read it. Then she read it again. "James Pruitt is willing to testify," she said. "His wife, too," Cade said. "And they've kept records of their own correspondence, the original deed that didn't match the transfer, everything. They've been waiting for this for 3 years. Emma set the wire down on the bed, and then quietly, without drama, without warning, she began to cry. Not sobbing, Not breaking down. Just the slow, steady release of something that had been held under pressure for a very long time, coming out in the way water comes through a cracked dam, not all at once, just inevitably. Cade had the good grace to find something urgent outside the door. Caleb stayed. He didn't say anything. He sat down on the chair beside the bed and stayed. She cried for maybe 3 minutes. Then she pressed the back of her hand against her eyes, exhaled and said, "I'm sorry." "Don't be," he said. "I don't usually." "Emma," he said. She looked at him. "You've been holding that for 3 years," he said. "Let it go." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked back at the wire in her hands. "He has a boy," she said. "James Pruitt. The boy would have been 8 when they lost the farm. He would have watched his father." She stopped. Children remember everything. They remember the things adults think they're protecting them from. "Yes," Caleb said. "I want that boy to know his father's name is going to be on the right side of this," she said. "I want him to know his father's land was taken illegally and that the law said so. That's," she pressed her lips together, "that's what I came down off the mountain for." "You didn't come down off any mountain," Caleb said. "You climbed up one." She looked at him. Something broke open in her expression. Not grief this time. Something else entirely. Something that moved in her face the way light moves when a door opens, sudden and warm and wide. "You climbed it with me," she said. He held her gaze. "Yes," he said. "I did." She reached out and put her hand over his where it rested on his knee. He didn't move. He just turned his hand over slowly and let her palm settle into his. They sat like that for a long time without saying anything. Outside Fort Benton went about its business wagons and voices, and the river moving beyond the buildings. The world doing the ordinary things it does when extraordinary things have just happened inside it. On the third morning, Cade came to them with his hat in his hands and something on his face that wasn't quite a smile, but was in that neighborhood. "Pryor resigned," he said. "Sent his letter to Washington before he could be formally removed, trying to control the terms." He shook his head slightly. "He'll still face charges. Resignation doesn't clear that." "And Holt," Emma said. "Formal federal hold is in place. His assets are frozen pending investigation. The actual trial will take months, probably come spring." He looked at her. "But he's not going anywhere, and he's not moving any land." "The families," she said. "How long until the reversals?" "Investigator gets here in 2 weeks," Cade said. "If the forgeries are confirmed, and Miss Carter, I've been doing this 20 years, they'll be confirmed. The process for land reversal starts immediately. It'll still take time, but it starts." Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Is it safe to go back?" Cade considered. "Holt's men are scattered. Without money moving, and with federal charges on the table, most of them won't risk it." He paused. "I'd take the main road, not the mountain trails. And I'd check in with the sheriff when you get to Harlan's Creek. I'm sending a letter ahead of you informing him of the federal proceedings. If he's smart, he'll get on the right side of this fast." Emma nodded. Then, Caleb's mountain, his property, his gate. She looked at Cade. "He had nothing to do with any of this except—" "The statement he gave me makes his position clear," Cade said. "He's a witness, not a party. He's fine." He put his hat back on. "You both are." Emma looked at Caleb. He was looking at her. They said goodbye to Cord and Bray at the edge of town. Cord shook Caleb's hand with the grip of a man who meant it. Bray nodded at Emma in the way of someone who didn't do sentiment but felt it anyway. "Tell Thomas we're grateful," Emma said. "He'll know," Cord said. "Word travels fast in timber country." He touched his hat. "Ma'am." He looked at Caleb. "Walker." They rode south, just the two of them the way it had started. For the first hour, neither of them talked much. The road was good, and the horses were rested, and the morning was moving toward warm in the way summer mornings do, slowly and inevitably. Then Emma said, "What do you do now?" He looked at her. "Same as always," he said. "Go back to the mountain." She nodded slowly. "Is that," she started, "is that what you want?" He was quiet for a moment. I don't know that what I want has changed much, he said carefully. But what the mountain means might have. He looked at the road ahead. It was a place I went to be away from things, spent a long time making sure the distance stayed. A pause. I'm not sure I want the same kind of distance anymore. She looked at him. What kind do you want? She said. Less, he said. She was quiet. Emma, he said. Yes. When this is settled, when the investigator's done, and Pruitt's testified, and the reversal process starts, where are you going? She took a long time answering. I don't know, she said honestly. Harlan's Creek doesn't have a school for me anymore. Not with things the way they are. She looked at the road. I've been thinking about the families, the ones on the list. Some of them have children who haven't been in a classroom in 2-3 years. Children who should have a teacher. Those families are scattered across 3 counties, he said. I know. Montana's big, he said. I know that too. The mountain's central to all 3 counties, he said. A person based there could reach all of them. She turned her head and looked at him. He kept his eyes on the road. I'm not asking you to stay, he said. I'm saying the mountain has room, for a school, for someone who wanted to build one. A pause. For someone who wanted to stay. She held the silence for a long moment. You've been thinking about this, she said. For a few days, he said. Since when exactly? He thought about it. Since the creek crossing, he said. When you came up the bank and said, that was bad, and immediately asked how far ahead the next obstacle was. He glanced at her. I thought that's a person who doesn't stop. And then I thought I don't want her to stop somewhere I'm not. Emma looked at him for a long time. The road moved under them. The horses walked steady and easy. That might be the most direct thing you've ever said to me, she said. I told you, he said. I don't see the point of saying things any other way. She looked at the road ahead. Ask me again, she said, when we're back on the mountain. All right, he said. And Caleb? He looked at her. The answer's probably yes, she said. He looked at the road. Something settled into him, not sudden, not like a door slamming open, but like a window that's been painted shut for years, and someone finally worked the frame loose and pushed it up, and the air came in. Quiet. Real. Long overdue. They rode on. The mountain was waiting in the south. And this time, neither of them was riding toward it alone. They rode into Harlan's Creek on a Tuesday afternoon, and the town noticed. Not loudly. Not with any one person stopping and pointing. But Caleb felt it the way he always felt a town's attention, in the small adjustments. The faces that turned a half second too long. The conversations that paused at the wrong moment. He'd ridden through Harlan's Creek maybe a dozen times in the past 3 years, and every time it had felt like walking through a room where people stopped talking because he'd walked in. This time was different. This time, they weren't just looking at him. They were looking at Emma. She rode straight. She always rode straight. But there was something different in it now. Not performance, not defiance. Just the particular posture of a woman who had been through something that had burned away everything unnecessary and left only what was real. The road dust was still on her jacket. Her hair was down. She had a knife wound healing in her left side and federal testimony on record in Fort Benton, and she looked like both of those things. The sheriff's office was on the main street. Caleb had expected to have to go looking for the man. Instead, Sheriff Dale Trumbull was standing on the boardwalk in front of his own office, like he'd been waiting, which meant Cade's letter had arrived ahead of them. Trumbull was a middle-aged man who had spent years carefully not making enemies on either side of the line between Holt's money and what was right. He had the look of a man who had known for a long time that the accounting was going to come due eventually, and had been quietly dreading the morning it did. That morning had apparently arrived. He looked at Emma first, then at Caleb. Miss Carter, he said. Mr. Walker. Sheriff, Emma said. A beat. I got a letter from Marshal Cade, Trumbull said. I know, Emma said. He looked at her for a long moment. I want you to know, he said slowly, carefully, like a man choosing each word with the awareness that there was no taking them back. That my office is going to cooperate fully with the federal investigation. He paused. And that I should have... He stopped. Started again. Some of what happened here. With the families. I should have looked harder. Emma held his gaze. Yes, she said. You should have. He didn't flinch from it. She respected that. Is there anything you need from me today? He said. Not today, she said. But there will be when the investigator arrives. I'll need witness access to the families on my list. Some of them may be reluctant. I'll need the law standing beside me when I ask them to come forward. You'll have it, Trumbull said. Emma nodded. She put her horse forward. Caleb lingered a moment. Trumbull looked at him. There was something in the sheriff's face, not quite an apology. Men like Trumbull didn't do apologies easily, but something adjacent to it. The things they said about you in this town, Trumbull said. The mountain ghost business, the rumors. He paused. Weren't fair. No, Caleb said. They weren't. He rode on. They stopped at the general store before leaving town, because Emma needed clean bandaging material and Caleb needed 2 things from the hardware supply, and it was the most ordinary errand in the world, except that when they walked in, the woman behind the counter, a Mrs. Haggerty, heavy-set and sharp-eyed, who had been one of the louder voices in the mountain ghost mythology over the years, looked at them both and then did something that surprised Caleb entirely. She came around the counter and took Emma's hand in both of hers. Ellen Henderson told me what you did, she said. Ellen Henderson and 3 other women in this town told me this morning. Her voice was tight and serious. You went up that mountain with evidence that could have gotten you killed. I had help, Emma said. Mrs. Haggerty looked at Caleb. Then she did something else Caleb hadn't expected. She said, Thank you, Mr. Walker. He didn't know what to do with that for a moment. Ma'am, he said finally. She went back behind her counter and began pulling what they'd asked for, and she didn't charge them for the bandaging material, and she didn't make a speech about it, which was exactly the right call. They left Harlan's Creek an hour before sunset and made the mountain road as the light went long and gold. Emma was quiet for most of it. The good kind of quiet, not closed off, not retreating, just settled. He could feel the difference by now. He'd learned her silences the way you learn the sounds of a place you've lived in long enough, which ones meant something was wrong, and which ones meant she was just thinking inside herself and didn't need company for it. Halfway up the mountain road, she said, Mrs. Haggerty's going to be an important person. He looked at her. How so? She talks, Emma said. Everyone knows she talks. In a town like Harlan's Creek, when a woman like Mrs. Haggerty changes what she's saying, changes what story she's telling other people follow. She looked at the road ahead. When the investigation goes public, there are going to be people in that town who are embarrassed about what they let happen, what they looked away from. The ones who are embarrassed need a way to put themselves on the right side of the story. Mrs. Haggerty just became that way. Caleb thought about that. You're thinking about how to build something, he said. I'm always thinking about how to build something, she said. It's the teacher in me. You can't just take the wrong thing down, you have to have something true to put in its place. She paused. Or people will just build another wrong thing because there's nothing else there. He thought about Daniel. About the 12 years he'd spent not building anything because the grief had been too loud. I thought about the mountain, what it had been and what it might be. The cabin needs a second room, he said. Emma turned her head. If you're going to base yourself there, he said, and run a school circuit through 3 counties, you'll need a room that isn't my main room. A place to work, keep your materials, meet parents when they come up. He kept his eyes on the trail. I can build it before winter. She looked at him for a long moment. You've been designing this in your head, she said. Since about Helena, he said. Caleb. Emma. You're doing it again, she said. The thing where you offer me something enormous, as if it's just arithmetic. It is just arithmetic, he said. You need a room. I can build one. It's not complicated. It's very complicated, she said quietly. He was quiet. I know, he said. But the complicated part isn't the room. She looked at the mountain ahead of them, the pine-dark shape of it against the evening sky. No, she said. It isn't. They rode on without resolving it, which was fine, because some things didn't need resolving yet. Some things just needed to be said, and then carried along for a while, until they found their own shape. They reached the cabin as full dark came down. He helped her with the horses while she held the lantern, and when the horses were seen to, he went inside first and got the fire going, and she came in behind him and stood in the middle of the main room and looked around at it the way she hadn't had time to look the first night she'd been here. It was the same cabin, same shelves, same work table, same sleeping loft, same everything. But it looked different to her now, he could tell. "Last time I was here, I was bleeding on your bunk, trying to convince myself I'd be gone by morning," she said. "I remember," he said. "It feels different." "Yes," he said. She turned to look at him. "Ask me," she said. He stilled. "You said to ask you again when we were back on the mountain," he said. "I know what I said." He set the poker against the hearth and straightened and looked at her. "Stay," he said. "Not because you need somewhere to be. Not because the school circuit needs a base. But because—" He stopped, and this was the part he was less practiced at, the part where the words needed to be more than plain. "Because I have not wanted to be in the same place as another person in a very long time. And I want to be in the same place as you." Emma looked at him. The fire was going. The cabin was warm. Outside, the mountain night was quiet in all the ways it was quiet when nothing was wrong. "I'm not easy," she said. "I know. I take on problems that aren't mine. I can't look at a wrong thing without—" "Emma," he said. "What?" "I know," he said. "I was there." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she said, "I'll need that room built before October. The mountain families I want to reach, some of them have children who've missed 2 full school years. I want to start before the snow closes the high passes." "I can have the frame up in 3 weeks," he said. "I'll need shelving. I'll build shelving. And you'll have to be patient with noise," she said. "Children are loud." "I've been patient with silence for 12 years, he said. "I think I can manage noise." Something in her face went very soft. Not fragile, not sentimental. Just open in the way that faces go open when they've decided to stop guarding something. "Then yes," she said. "I'll stay." The knock came 8 days later. Caleb was cutting timber for the frame of the new room when he heard hoofbeats on the south trail. Not the hard urgency of riders coming with trouble. Just steady travel, 2 horses moving up, deliberate. He set the axe down and waited. The man who came around the bend was maybe 40, lean and sun-weathered, with the particular look of someone who had been doing hard physical work in a dry climate for several years. He had a boy with him, 11 or 12, riding his own horse with the easy posture of a kid who'd grown up in the saddle. The man pulled up when he saw Caleb. "Looking for a Mr. Caleb Walker," he said. "You found him," Caleb said. The man looked at him, then passed him at the cabin. "My name's James Pruitt," he said. "I got a letter from a woman named Emma Carter. Said she was based up here." He paused. "I rode up from Wyoming." Caleb felt something move in his chest. "She's inside," he said. "I'll get her." He went to the cabin door. "Emma," he said. She appeared in the doorway. She looked past him, and she saw James Pruitt, and she saw the boy. She went very still for just a moment. Then she came down the porch steps. Pruitt looked at her. "Miss Carter," he said. "Thomas Ketterman's nephew told us what you did, how you found the records, what it cost you to get them to the marshal." His jaw worked. "My wife wanted to come. She's not well enough for the ride yet, but she wanted me to tell you." He stopped, and the stop had years in it. The kind of compressed weight that accumulates when a family has been carrying a wrong thing for a long time. "She wanted me to tell you that when we got that wire from Fort Benton, saying the transfer was going to be reviewed. He shook his head. She sat down at the kitchen table, and she didn't say anything for about 5 minutes. And then she said, "Somebody finally looked." Emma pressed her hand briefly to her mouth. Then she lowered it. "Mr. Pruitt," she said steadily, "your family's land is coming back. The investigator confirmed the forgery last week. The reversal process has started. It won't be fast. It'll be spring, maybe summer, but it started. James Pruitt looked at her. His eyes had gone bright in the way that men's eyes go bright when they are not going to cry, but are very close to it, and are using everything they have to hold the line. "That's my boy," he said. His voice had gone rough. "Samuel. He was 8 when we lost the farm." Emma looked at Samuel. Samuel was watching her with the serious measuring eyes of a child who has learned that the adult world is not always safe and is still deciding case by case who to extend trust to. "Hello, Samuel," Emma said. "Ma'am," he said. "Your father tells me you've been in Wyoming." "Yes, ma'am." "Did you go to school there?" A pause. "Some," he said. "Not regular." "Would you like to?" she said. He looked at his father, then back at her. "Yes, ma'am," he said. It was simple and direct, and it had the particular weight of something a child has wanted for a while and hasn't said out loud, because saying things out loud makes them easier to lose. Emma looked at Caleb. He looked back at her. He thought about what she'd said on the mountain road. You can't just take the wrong thing down. You have to have something true to put in its place. I thought, there it is. "Mr. Pruitt," he said, "you and your boy come inside. There's coffee and Miss Carter has some things to tell you about the school she's setting up." Pruitt looked at him. "You're the mountain man," he said. "The one who got her to Fort Benton." "She got herself," Caleb said. "I just knew the roads." Pruitt looked at him for a moment. Then he swung down from his horse and said, "Samuel, come on." They stayed 3 days, the Pruitts. Samuel turned out to be a child of particular intensity, the kind who asked questions that went 2 layers deeper than the question before, who read everything Emma put in front of him with a focus that made her catch her breath the first time she saw it, who followed Caleb around the property on the second day with the careful, watchful interest of a boy who had been without a consistent male figure for several years, and was cautiously, quietly assessing whether this one was worth trusting. On the afternoon of the second day, Caleb let him help hold the frame pieces for the new room, while Caleb drove the join pins. Samuel didn't talk much. He just held what needed holding, steady and precise. After a while, Caleb said, "You've done this kind of work before." "My dad taught me," Samuel said. "Before." A pause. "He's a good teacher," Caleb said. Samuel looked at the timber in his hands. "We're going back," he said. "When they give the land back. We're going back to Montana." "Good," Caleb said. "Will the school still be here when we come back?" Caleb drove the last pin home. He looked at the frame solid square the way his father had taught him, the way he'd taught himself twice over in the years since. "Miss Carter's not going anywhere," he said. Samuel thought about that. "Are you?" he said. Caleb looked at the boy. "No," he said. "I'm not." Samuel nodded with this particular satisfaction of a child who has gotten a straight answer and knows what to do with it. They went back to work. The Pruitts left on the third morning. Samuel shook Caleb's hand at the paddock gate, seriously, formally, the grip of a boy trying to do it right. "Thank you for letting us stay," he said. "Come back when your family gets their land," Caleb said. "I want to hear about it." Samuel nodded. He turned to Emma. She held out a book. He looked at it. "McGuffey's Fourth Reader," she said. "That's your level, I think. Maybe a little under, but start there, and by the time the school's running, you'll be ready for the 5th. He took it carefully, the way you take something you're going to take care of. "Miss Carter," he said, "are you actually a good teacher?" Emma blinked. "What?" "My teacher in Wyoming wasn't very good," he said seriously. "She made us copy things all day. I didn't learn much." Emma stared at him for a moment. Then she laughed, the real laugh, the one that caught her off guard, and pulled at her stitches, and she pressed her hand against her side and laughed anyway. "Samuel Pruitt," she said, "I am an excellent teacher." He considered this. "All right," he said. He put the book in his saddlebag like it was something valuable, and swung up on his horse and followed his father down the south trail. Caleb and Emma stood at the gate and watched them go until the trail bent and they were out of sight. Then Emma said, "That child." "Yes," Caleb said. "He's going to be extraordinary." "Yes," he said. "I need to make sure the school is ready," she said, and turned back toward the cabin. He caught her arm. Not hard, just enough. She turned and looked at him. He said, "For just a minute." She looked at him. "What?" she said. "For just a minute," he said. "Stop planning." She opened her mouth. He shook his head. She closed it. She stood there beside him at the gate in the summer morning, and she looked at the trail where the Pruitts had gone, and she let herself feel it, all of it. The thing they'd built, and the thing that was coming, and the mountain, and the man beside her, without immediately turning it into a task. It lasted maybe 45 seconds before she said, "I want to write to the Henderson family today." "I know," he said. He let go of her arm. "Come on." 3 weeks later, the federal investigator confirmed all 7 land forgeries. The letter came on a Friday. Emma read it at the work table in the new room, the room Caleb had finished the week before, exactly as described, with shelving on 2 walls and a south-facing window that brought in the best morning light. She read it once. Then she set it down and sat very still. Caleb came to the doorway. He looked at her face. "It's confirmed," she said. He leaned against the frame. "All 7, he said. "All 7. She looked at the letter. "The reversals will be processed in order of filing. The Pruitts are first because James filed his counterclaim in person in Fort Benton the same week we were there. They could have their land back by Christmas." Caleb was quiet. "By Christmas," he said. "A family went to Wyoming because someone forged a name on a piece of paper," Emma said. "And a boy grew up without his home, and they get it back by Christmas." She pressed her lips together, held it. "Is that justice? Is that enough?" "It's not enough," he said. "It'll never be fully enough. But it's the law saying the right thing, which is rarer than it ought to be." He crossed the room and sat down across from her. "And it's a boy who gets to grow up knowing his father's name was on the right side of the record. That matters." She looked at him. "You've changed," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "The man I met at that gate 6 weeks ago," she said. "He would not have said that. He would have said something true and careful and then found something to fix." "I still found something to fix," he said. "What?" "The south fence line," he said. "I've been repairing it all week." She stared at him. Then she shook her head. "Caleb Walker," she said. "Emma Carter," he said. She picked up the letter and held it. "Ruth Ketterman should see this," she said. "We can ride down Sunday," he said. "And I want to send copies to every family on the list before the end of the week. They should hear it from me, not from a government notice." "All right. And I need to write to Samuel." "Emma." "What?" "Sunday," he said. "Today, it can just be good news." She looked at him. He held her gaze. Something moved across her face. The same thing that had moved there at the gate. The thing that kept surprising her. The feeling of being seen without having to perform the seeing. She set the letter down. "Today," she said, "it's good news." The twist came on a Saturday morning, and it came in the shape of Del Porter. Caleb was at the woodpile when the man rode up the south trail alone, moving slow hat off before he'd even stopped his horse. Caleb set the splitting maul down and waited. Del Porter looked worse than the last time Caleb had seen him, thinner, older in the face, with the particular hollowness of a man who has been living inside a decision he regrets. "Walker," he said. "Del," Caleb said. A long pause. "I told them about the high trail," Del said. "Holt's men. They asked me if I knew any routes through the high country, and I—" He stopped. "I needed the money. My wife—" He stopped again, looked at his hat in his hands. "I know that doesn't make it all right." Caleb was quiet. "Those men came close to killing you," Del said. "Both of you. The ambush on the North Trail, I didn't know they were going to do that. I thought they just wanted to find you and talk." His jaw worked. "I know that's probably not worth much." Caleb looked at him for a long time. "No," he said. "It doesn't make it all right." Del nodded. "Why'd you come up here?" Caleb said. "Because I heard what happened," Del said. "What she found. What you both did." He looked up. And because Holt's mill is shut down pending investigation, which means I don't have work, and I've got 2 kids and a sick wife, and He stopped and looked directly at Caleb for the first time. I need to know if there's any way back from what I did, or if I just have to carry it. Caleb looked at him. Emma had come to the porch. She'd heard enough. She stood there and said nothing, watching. You'll carry part of it, Caleb said. That's honest and there's no way around it. He was quiet for a moment. But the investigator's going to need people who worked at that mill, people who saw things, heard things. He held Dell's gaze. If you've got testimony, real testimony, things you know for certain, and you give it, that's not erasing what you did. But it's doing the right thing when it costs you something. That's different from nothing. Dell was quiet. My wife needs medicine I can't afford right now, he said. With the mill shut. There's timber work, Caleb said. North Face. I've been running it alone. I could use a second man. He said it flatly without sentiment. It doesn't pay as well as Holt's mill, but it pays. Dell stared at him. Why? He said. Because your kids need to eat, Caleb said. And because a man who comes up a mountain to say he was wrong is telling me something about who he actually is. He picked up the maul. Come back Monday. Bring work clothes. Dell put his hat back on. He looked at Emma on the porch. She looked back at him. I'm sorry, Miss Carter, he said. For my part in it. Emma held his gaze. The investigator's in Helena through October, she said. His name is Walter Gibbs. He's taking statements from anyone with direct knowledge of Holt's operations. She paused. If you want to do something with your sorry, that's where to take it. Dell looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. He turned his horse and rode back down the trail. Caleb set the maul against the block. Looked up at Emma. You could have let him walk away with nothing, she said. Yes, he said. Why didn't you? He thought about Gideon Marsh, about a snow gully and a trapper who hadn't had any good reason to stop. Because someone did that for me once, he said. Long time ago. Emma stepped down off the porch. She walked to him and stood close. She put her hand on his chest over his heart, and she left it there. He put his hand over hers. They stood like that in the summer morning, the mountain quiet around them, the new room framed against the cabin wall. The south fence line mended the horses in the paddock, the letter on the work table inside that said 7 families were getting their land back. Gideon Marsh, she said quietly. Yes, he said. Do you know what happened to him? He died the winter I left his camp, he said. Old age. I heard from a trapper who came through in the spring. He paused. I never got to thank him. Emma looked up at him. You've been thanking him this whole time, she said. Every time you stopped when someone needed stopping for. He looked at her. She looked at him. The summer was full around them, the heat that didn't apologize, the light through the pines, the sound of the horses, the smell of cut wood and wild grass, and the clean, particular silence of a high mountain morning. He leaned down and pressed his mouth to her forehead and held it there. She closed her eyes. Caleb, she said. Yes. Build me that school. Already started, he said. 6 months later, when the first snow came down off the ridge and the high passes closed for winter, there were 11 children who came to the mountain cabin twice a week for school. They came from 3 counties. Some of them had ridden 2 hours to get there. Their parents brought them, stayed for coffee, talked with each other across fence lines that Silas Holt had spent years making into walls. Samuel Pruitt was one of them. Howe was reading the McGuffey's Fifth by then, and Emma had already started leaving him books that weren't on any school list, just books she thought would fit the particular shape of his mind. On the first day of school, when all 11 children were settled around the work table that Caleb had extended 6 feet longer to make room, Samuel raised his hand. Emma called on him. Miss Carter, he said. My father says this mountain used to belong to a ghost. The other children looked up. Emma looked at him. That's not quite right, she said. It belonged to a man who didn't let anyone know him well enough to see he wasn't a ghost. She paused. That's different. Samuel thought about it. What changed? He said. Emma looked through the window at Caleb, who was at the woodpile in the clear December light, moving with the deliberate economy of a man who knew exactly how much wood they'd need to get through a Montana winter and had already done the math. She looked back at Samuel. "Someone knocked on his gate," she said, and he chose to open it. Samuel considered this with the particular seriousness he brought to everything. "Is that the whole story?" he said. "No," she said. "But it's where it started." She picked up the chalk. "Now," she said, "let's begin." And there on a mountain that a whole county had once called haunted, in a room that had been built out of reclaimed timber, and a second chance with 11 children who had no idea they were sitting inside the answer to a question that had taken 12 years and one broken schoolteacher and one very long summer to finally solve, the school began. Caleb came in through the door at noon with firewood and set it by the hearth without saying a word, because Emma was mid-sentence, and he'd learned that you did not interrupt Emma Carter mid-sentence under any circumstances whatsoever. He sat in the chair by the hearth. He listened. He looked at the room. The shelves full of books she'd sourced from 3 different towns. The children bent over their slates. The way Emma moved when she was teaching, all that intensity and precision and care focused down into something a child could actually hold. He thought about Daniel. He thought about 12 years on a mountain, with the silence growing larger every year, and how he'd told himself the silence was the point, when really it was just what loss sounds like when you let it set. He thought about a woman at a gate who wouldn't let herself be sent back. He thought, this is what it looks like when something broken becomes something built. Samuel Pruitt looked up from his slate and caught Caleb watching. He held Caleb's gaze for a moment with those serious, assessing eyes. Then he gave a small, definitive nod, the nod of a child who has finished deciding something important and arrived at his conclusion and went back to his work. Caleb looked at Emma. She was at the board writing. She didn't look up, but the corner of her mouth moved just slightly, just enough. She knew he was there. She always knew. Outside, the snow came down quiet and steady on the mountain that had once belonged to a ghost, and the smoke went up from the chimney straight into the cold December sky, and inside somebody was teaching, and somebody was learning, and the silence that had lived in those walls for 12 years had finally, completely, and without any fanfare whatsoever, been replaced by something far better. Life had come to the mountain, and this time